Welcome to Learning to Thrive with Chronic Illness. I'm delighted to introduce my first interview, Liz Thompson. She is a dear friend of mine whom I met about 2 years ago. The first thing I noticed about her was the joy she exudes. The other thing I noticed was her limp. Unfortunately, she's been suffering with a chronic injury for many years. I'm excited to introduce Liz and let her share her story with you.
I'm Liz Thompson, and I've been married for 16 years. My husband and I met back at Biola, but we really started dating at Cal State Fullerton. We were 25 and 26 years old, and I'm now 42. In that time span, we waited about 5 years to have kids. We had our three beautiful children who are now 11, 7, and 3.5. And it was about 5, maybe 6 years ago, depending if you ask me or my husband, when my injury in my hip started. It had been tight previous to that throughout the years with dance. It always felt like the hip I needed to stretch a little bit more. I didn't get into any sort of like technical style dancing until college. And even that, it was a few years into college. So I started out at Biola University in Southern California, and I was there for 2.5 years as a psychology major, and I just decided that wasn't right for me. I actually got into some like partying and some lifestyle choices that didn't really go with Biola as being like a Christian. So I wouldn't say I lost my faith during that time, but I certainly took a little bit of a detour. And during that time, I decided to transfer to Cal State Fullerton, explore some other degrees, possibilities, and I ended up as a dance major when I was there, which was just sort of a pipe dream to start, honestly, because I was like, I love dancing, and I was a terrible dancer. It was bad, but I loved it, and so I just went for it, and I ended up as a dance major out of that. And I kept it up after college. I kept taking classes. I ended up in a small company, not a very professional company. You know, the biggest things we would do would be on like college stages, you know. So it wasn't like a super pro company, but it definitely was an extremely meaningful time in my life to be a part of that. But about 5 or 6 years ago, I was going down the stairs in our home and I felt it like give out. I had this feeling of it giving out. And at that point, I was under the impression that I would just, stretch it out, go to the chiropractor, work it out, get it back. And while I was able to sort of keep it at bay for a while, truly, after about a couple of years, it just started spiraling out of control. Before my injury, I'd already had 2 of my children. And Savannah, I think, was about 1.5 years when I felt my hip give out. We lived in Colorado at the time. And previous to that, I feel like I was really active with the kids, especially Charlotte, my firstborn. She and I would go on long walks. We lived in Santa Barbara previous to that. We would spend 4-5 hours sometimes just walking to the ocean and exploring the forest and all these things. When we got to Colorado, I did slow down a bit just because of the weather and the snow. It kind of kept it harder, especially with littler ones, to get out. And in retrospect, I wonder if some of the reason that my body finally gave out was because I'd sort of like stopped keeping myself in such good shape. You kind of always go back and ask why did this happen? So that was one of my questions. And then we moved back to California for a little bit. The injury started getting worse. There was questions when we got pregnant with Dallas. One of my fears was during birth, am I even going to be able to, I'm trying to say this in a really, I'm not sure how to say this. Would I be able to birth him naturally because of my hip's inability to even open up to a certain degree? Like, it was really locked into place, and I feel like it was a huge blessing that I was still able to naturally birth him. As he got bigger, it got harder and harder to want to carry him from place to place. I would, but it was painful. And so I found myself, again, relying on my oldest daughter especially to do things for me. and just kind of like bossing her around. I guess I'm her mom. I'm allowed to boss her around, but more than I would want to. I would rely on her very heavily to sort of do little tasks for me so that I didn't have to do it. Can you pick that up off the floor? If something would fall, it was just like, ugh. Like, how am I like getting down to the floor and back up? It was just not fun. And so I would a lot of times rely on my oldest, and that was not something that I wanted to do, but I sort of just fell back on it and felt like I almost had to, just in order to function and get through the day-to-day things. As my son got even bigger and heavier, if he would fall asleep on me, and then I'd have to carry him to the bed, it was just like, oh my goodness, how am I going to do this? It was just, it was incredibly difficult. Things that I felt like should just be easy and normal were challenging and hard. So about 3 years ago, my family moved here to Arizona, and at that point, but previous to that, I kind of kept my injury at bay with some chiropractic care. I'm very into natural remedies, and so I was kind of exploring and seeing what kind of things I could do. So here are some of my personal recommendations of things that I did take that I felt like were helpful just for my overall health and well-being. And obviously I'm not a doctor, so these are just my personal recommendations. Talk to your doctor, obviously, first. If you want to try things, these are just things that helped me. I love this company. It's called Ancestral Supplements, and they basically encapsulate things like beef spleen, liver, heart, brain, just crazy stuff, based on the idea that throughout history, traditional cultures actually would consume all of the animal, they say nose to tail, and they believe that like supports like. So I ended up taking a lot of things like their collagen or different bone supplements from them, because they believe if you take collagen, it'll support your collagen. If you take bone, it will support your bone. Spleen is actually something I started taking probably right before and definitely after my surgery, because it helps with iron levels. So I love this company, and you can try that. I also used Deep Blue from doTERRA topically. So this has like an intense cooling feeling to the muscles, and it's just incredibly sore. A lot of times my upper back would get sore, my lower back would get sore, my glute would get sore because of what was happening with my hip. The rest of my body had to compensate, and so this was really soothing on muscles. And then Copaiba I would use both before and after my surgery. It works on one of the pain receptors in the brain, and it's very calming, and so this one I used a lot, especially for before bed, just to help soothe pain and help me sleep a little bit better. Oh my goodness, I have too many supplements to recommend. This one, fulvic acid, is a newer supplement. I started taking it about a year ago, and it's basically ancient soil. It's like decomposed organic matter that should be in our food. It should be on our produce, but because of modern farming practices, it's gone. And it's tons of minerals and some other things that happen in decomposed soil, probiotics and prebiotics. It's great for gut health. So that one I just kind of used for general overall health. This product I've loved. I've used this on me and my children since Dallas, my youngest, was 6 months old, and it's a heavy metal detox. It'll also get rid of pesticides and other toxins. Again, that's just a general overall health thing, but my understanding of heavy metals is that they can actually, if there's an injured part of your body, the heavy metals will go there and just make it worse. And so that was one of the ways that I was trying to just flush negative things out of my body so that I could be as healthy as possible. And I still take all of this stuff. So it wasn't like I was just taking it before. Like, I love this stuff to support my health. Again, doTERRA has an entire line of supplements. but this one specifically is their energy blend to support the body on a cellular level. And I was just constantly like looking for new things that I could add or try. Once we got to Arizona, I quit my chiropractic care, and that's when I really noticed my hip going downhill. I started physical therapy, hoping that could maybe give me something. My physical therapist, well, at first was like, oh, we can fix this. A few months in, he was the one that said, we're not getting anywhere, and I think you should go to the surgeon. But it was really going downhill. I was starting to limp a lot more. My right leg was completely starting to turn out, and it seemed shorter. And so every step I took was like a little bit of like a gallop, like a horse's gallop. So he sent me to the surgeon, and the surgeon looked at it, and he showed me the x-ray that day. And he said, I wish I could tell you that I could just inject something into it and it would be better, but that's actually not true. We actually are looking at a full hip replacement. So that was 2.5 years ago, and I said, I don't think so. I was still determined to fix it on my own, or to have some sort of divine intervention, miracle situation. And I was pretty determined not to have a surgery, and that was probably a big mistake. Like, never say never, right? You say never, and then that's the thing you end up having to do. But I veered off. I tried some alignment therapy called Egoscue, which maybe if I had tried sooner, 5 years ago at the beginning, maybe that could have helped me. But it just didn't. Like, I would get basically aligned in my hip for about 30 minutes, maybe after the session. These were incredibly expensive sessions, $100 to $200 probably a session. I think they gave me like a bulk discount, but I would feel better for 30 minutes maybe, and it wasn't all the way better. It was like slightly better, and then it would just go away. And that was basically the case for everything. I did go back to chiropractic. I started getting, I called it electrocution therapy, but it's like pulse electromagnetic therapy into my muscles, or shockwave therapy. It was very humbling. Like, I'm constantly showing like awkward body parts to like strange men who are like electrocuting me and like putting needles in me. And again, it was like I might feel a tiny bit better for 15 minutes and then nothing. Coming from a natural mindset, you sort of think like, if I can just find the right remedy, that's going to be the thing that's going to fix it. Or maybe if I combine enough of the right things, that'll be the thing that's going to fix it. And I'm sure the Western medicine people probably feel the same way, where it's like, if I can just find the right medication or, have the right surgery, that's going to be the key. And so you're constantly trying to put all these puzzle pieces together and wondering, what haven't I tried yet? All the while just really avoiding surgery. And I think part of that was maybe some pride. Like, I really want to be able to fix this on my own, or like, I want God to take care of this. Like, I want my faith in God I want him to come through with a supernatural miracle, and then look, he'll get all the credit. I can say, look what God did. And yet none of those things were working. And I really felt like the Lord, set me down a different path, a path that I didn't want to take. I really was just starting to limp more and more. When I stand up from sitting like I'm doing now, I would have to hold on to the table or the side of the couch and kind of like right myself, and then hobble a little bit. I'm always limping. I was constantly asking my kids to do things for me so that I don't have to get up and do them. And I was missing out on life. I was missing out on walks that my family would take. I would ride one of the kids' scooters so I could kind of like just glide along, but I couldn't ride a bike. I couldn't walk for long distances. We actually went to Disneyland a few months before my surgery, and I was just like shocked that I even like made it through the day because it was so painful. So I finally decided I'm just missing out on too much of life. And I've tried everything that I can try, and nothing has worked. And I've also waited for a miracle for 5 to 6 years, and that hasn't happened. And I happened to go to a birthday party with one of my girlfriends, and she said, someone that goes to our church is married to a surgeon. Tyler, my husband, happened to know this surgeon's wife from high school, and it just seemed like God was like setting the stage for me to meet this surgeon, because he was not only an amazing surgeon, he was a believer, which was important to me, that he had faith, that I shared faith with him, and he also was a trainer in his field. He does robotic assisted surgery, so a robot helps to put the hip into place. A CT scan helps to get the perfect shape for the hip, and then the robot helps put the hip into exactly the right spot that's needed. So I'm just not, another, I don't know how to describe it, but it's not just any old hip going into my body and my body's supposed to just adjust around it. It's like the perfect shape for me and my body, and the robot makes sure it gets in there appropriately. So he's a trainer in this field. So it all kind of came together where he was literally probably the only person that I would have ever trusted to do this. And so I just decided, like, I've tried everything to fix myself. Like, let's just see if someone else can fix me. Like, at this point, how much worse could it get? I'm already missing out on so much life. I'm in pain. Could it get worse? And maybe it could have. And so when I saw him, he said, how about, in 4 weeks, come in and get the surgery? And that's what I did. One thing that they told me the first day that I went into their office that was so important to me was, we don't want you to be on narcotics. We don't want you to be dealing with the pain with opioids or hardcore drugs. And coming from a natural mindset, that was part of the reason I resisted surgery. One of the reasons is because I don't want to be, especially because I mentioned before, I have a past where I was kind of a partier. I didn't want to reintroduce things into my life that could have been a problem for me, that maybe would have been a struggle for me. And I'm a mom of 3, I'm nursing my son. I didn't want those things in my system. And they said, you can do this with Tylenol if you want to. And I really did. And I only did it for a few days. And I think part of that was because of my natural background. I was able to wean off things quickly and go back to using those natural things. So as of today, I am 6 weeks and 2 days post-surgery, and I am completely floored by the difference. It's funny because by the time we had moved here to Arizona, the people that know me here in Arizona only knew me with a limp. They only saw me, struggling. And so it's actually really fun and exciting for the people here who have come alongside me in my journey and really prayed for me to see me how I am now, because for me, in some ways, it's how I was before, but for them, this is like a whole new side of me that they've never seen. And I'm extremely grateful. I feel almost back to normal, if you will. There's some things I can see that maybe will never get better, or maybe will get better over time, that still require work, but I'm so thankful that I got the surgery. And yeah, I'm just excited about what could be now. I've started walking again. I've tried riding my husband's bike. I'm swimming, and it feels like a new lease on life. I think when you've been in a state of pain for so long and sacrificing things that you've loved and unable to do certain things with your kids, and then suddenly you're given those things back, it does feel like a new lease on life. It feels like things that you would have taken for granted before, like the ability to just walk, to stand up and walk across the room. Like, that is something you take for granted. And sometimes I feel like just this overpowering emotion that I forget sometimes. I start telling my kids, like, can you? And then I'm like, wait a minute, I can do that. And I can just stand up and walk. And there's just this overwhelming sense of thankfulness that, like, I can do this again. And it's really special. It's made just the simple things something that I can be thankful about. So now that my hip is so much better, I feel like the world is my oyster again. I really would like to start dancing again, probably social dancing, which is something my husband and I did. We would go swing dancing. There's a whole group at church that goes country line dancing, which I was never really into, but I'm like, why not? Now's the time. I would love to ride bikes again with my kids, or go for hikes once the weather cools down. I even would consider maybe going back to a dance class. I'm a little nervous about that. Pilates, I feel like I'm ready to embrace physical activities again. So I'm excited about that. Maybe start photography again. I homeschool my kids. And so one thing that was a struggle is I actually tutor at their weekly co-op, and I'd have to stand in front of the class. And so I would hobble this way and that, and turn this on and help the kids. And I've already started tutoring this year, a couple weeks ago, and it's already been a huge difference just to be able to stand up there and not be in so much pain, and get around to the kids and squat down and stand up. And it's just, again, those things that the normal person would just take for granted because they can just do those things all the time, those feel amazing to me now. And so we'll just see what God brings, and I'm really excited for whatever that is.